There is a beauty all around in every situation, in every instance. If you are keen enough, you'll spot something that is appealing, something that is tastier, something that is so attractive to the eye. But in most cases, rarely do we focus on the beauty. If you're somebody who is ever focusing on the beauty in every individual, rarely will you look at their flaws. You'll only focus on their strengths. Every human being God created, there is beauty in that person. Every art, everything that has been done by somebody. Let's take an example of these architectural structures. You look someone's mind, how they've been done differently, but in an appealing manner. Someone just decides to create something, a given seat, and it becomes so beautiful. Sometime back, I attended a graduation ceremony for a former student of mine, and there is a power statement that that girl uttered. That student said she was celebrating her graduation, her achievement as a graduate of Catholic University, but there's something she observed, and she informed the members of the audience that she might have gone to school and she was graduating with second upper, but there is something she's really admired from somebody who didn't go up to the level she's gone. She said, or she asserted, that the person who has kept on sending her money is somebody who is a mechanic, who didn't go beyond the form but went for that training. But the first person and who has consistently sent money to her was this mechanic, and she was really proud of this person. And she told the group that even as she is celebrating her degree, her graduation, she knows that there are so many other people in that place who might not have privilege to go to university, but they're doing lots. That is art, and everyone has that gift. When I looked at that, somebody who has accomplished, who could have opted to look down upon other people who didn't make, but she was able to spot. Even if you study the society well, there are so many people who are gifted in other areas. Some are singers who didn't even go studying music in the music schools, but they are smart in their arts and they are making lots of cash. I've seen several people on podcasts. Others are even going into the mainstream media industries, but they didn't study media. Some of them end up studying media because it is in them, but others have studied, but they're not good as that. I've seen top sports persons who are earning lots of cash, the likes of Ronaldo, phenomenal, who did not even go beyond class 3, dropped out of school, but super gifted in that. There is beauty all around. Someone might have dropped out of school, but there is something else that he is the only one that has, that nobody has. People like Cristiano Ronaldo, gifted in their art, does so much, didn't even go beyond, but they have something. Right now, there's so many people thinking of the CBC. How I wish that it can be followed to the letter, and then this society will be satisfying all. Today, I thought of this beauty in every instance. I've just looked at the sunlight, and I remembered that some time back, we really yearned for this beauty, for this sunshine to come back, but it wasn't there. It was pure gold. Right now we have it. Some are taking it for granted. At times you just need something warm, neither cold nor... But when you lack it is when you see the essence. I've been in school whereby there is lots of water. Every time I need it, I can go bathe 10 times. But I've remembered that in some places, people like that. And therefore, this time, whatever I want you to focus on, as a human being that God created, that there is beauty all around. In every place you stay, in every person you interact with, concentrate on the beauty and you will learn to be happy. On Monday, we'll be having English paper 1 going on. And of course, English is made up of 3 sets of papers. There is paper 1, there is paper 2, and then there is paper 3. But at this moment, I'm going to focus on the paper, the first paper, 101/1, that will be done on Monday, the very first exam in the morning. It is a very easy paper that only examines on the oral skills, the power of speaking, be it written, be it spoken. And once a student is able to focus on that, the learner can easily go ahead and perform. Of course, question 1, I'll give brief commentary. It is functional writings. Functional writings, it could be business letters, it could be friendly letters, it could be all other forms of writing, it could be minute writings. As a smart student who knows the survival techniques, you might not have done a lot, but if you've mastered the art of going through the questions briefly, then you should be able to score at least 14 or 15 in functional writing. And how do you do this? By easily focusing on the marking points of every functional writing. A case scenario, for example, last year it was a personal journal, K.C.S.E 2023, paper 1. It was a function. It was a personal journal, and of course the learner ought to have just concentrated on the marking points and the key areas of earning ticks. Like a personal journal must have a title bearing that the word a personal journal. Could be a personal journal on a trip to Migingo. That is a tick. And then of course there are the subtitles. The subtitle must have the day, must have the date, must have the month and the year clearly written. And then under it, the examiner concentrated or focused on the key marking points. That is what is it that did you see? Observation. Again, what is it that excited you? The amazements. And then ultimately, what was your opinion about the day? So the learner that has marked or mastered the key areas of scoring marks could easily survive. We can't dwell so much on functional writings because this time they're likely to bring another one. But another example, if you're given something like maybe minute writing, of course they'll focus on the title. And then they'll also play with the words. They'll ask you, maybe they'll tell you, there is a given meeting that had been held before. They'll not tell you that this is the second meeting, but the fact that they're telling you that there is a meeting that had been held before, then it means as a smart student, you will know that these minutes you are going to write must have the matters arising. Again, you must always remember, just like I've said in personal journal, you focus on the key areas of scoring. In this case still, you must also remember that there must be a title. Again, if you're talking about the preliminaries on the minute writing, then you must always tell the examiner when the meeting started and without the time the meeting started, then it means even if there is the element of preliminary still, you are not going to score. So your preliminary must have that. If you are talking about matters arising, of course, after the preliminaries, you must go to the reading and confirmation of the previous minutes. But again, you must indicate from after the confirmation, the matters arising. It was which minute of the previous meetings. And then, of course, if you get into the body of minutes writing, every minute there must be discussions and resolution. Discussions and agreement. For example, members discussed or observed that there was need for every member to contribute or register with a given amount of cash. But then later on, at the end of discussion, there must be resolution. So the examiner will just go through your work, will not go through lots of writings and check, did this learner indicate that there were discussions and resolutions. So ensure that every minute you're indicating has got the discussions and resolutions or agreement. Then the examiner will be smiling as he gives you tick. Then as you sum up the minute writing, if it comes, of course there are so many, ensure that you also indicate that the minute ended at a given time. The time of closure must always be included. There are so many functional writings we can talk about, but let me remind you of something that has been updated of late, and this is crucial. Of late, if it is business writing or anything that calls for date writing, then before you write the actual date, you must include the day. For example, if it were on a Monday, then it must be Monday, comma, then it followed with the date 27th September 2024. So it means without the day, then the examiners are not likely to give you the mark. So that is a new observation that the learner must have. So I'm pleading with my learners, with my students, with the candidates who are sitting for their exams this time, that focus on the basic forms, the marking points of all the functional writings you've ever done. Then you're likely to score 15 or 16. Again, another strategy, if we are not saying that the functional writing is likely to come in Form 3 or Form 4, but the trend shows that when the previous year it was in 1 or 2, then there is possibility of it this time coming in Form 3 or Form 4, but it's not a guarantee. So I'll advise you as a smart student this time around, now that a personal journal was in Form 1 or Form 2, this time also try to put lots of emphasis on the functional writings in paper 2. I'll not talk about cloze test, but as a brief reminder, if you want to get the answers for the cloze test, simply read it twice or thrice. Then always concentrate, which topic is it talking about? Is it about communication? Then if it's about communication, which vocabulary or parts of speech are you likely to include when you are talking about the communication? If it is advertisement, if it is something on pollution, the title should always guide you. And always remember that before you start inserting the answer, go through the entire cloze test without necessarily filling in the blank spaces before filling. Then afterwards, think about the parts of speech that is relevant. And always note that if the answer starts at the beginning of the sentence, then the answer must start with a capital letter. But if it is within the sentence, then it starts with a small letter. If a comma is needed, please ensure that you insert that comma. And always remember that the parts of speech should be a one-word answer and avoid giving alternatives. I won't give you more information on that, but briefly, let me advise you on question 3, oral skills. It carries 30 marks. And if you're a key performer, if you're a key speaker, if you're a great listener, you should always be ready to answer these questions and score. In most cases, 3A, the first question in oral skills, will talk about testing on the performance. It can be an oral poem. It can be, like last year, it was a speech. Then you are asked in the exam, the first question of that what is it that makes this an oral speech? Then could be there was an element of dialogue. Could be there was an element of direct address, etc., etc. This time you never know. Maybe they might give you a simple poem. And then they ask you, what makes this poem musical or singable? For example, a poem that I really love talking about, every step I take, every move I make, every single day, every time I pray, I'll be missing you. That is a poem. But again, instead of reciting it, I can easily sing it. Every step I take, every move I make, every single day, every time I pray, I'll be missing you. Thinking of that day when you went away. What a life to take, what a bond to break. I'll be missing you. You see, that is a poem. But again, instead of reciting it, I can easily sing it. And then the examiner comes and asks you, what is it that makes this poem musical or singable? Then it means, if you are keen, you'll realize that at the end of every line, there is the same or similarity of the sound. So in simple terms, the examiner is likely to ask you the sound devices employed. So before you get into the exam room on Monday, ensure that you have an idea on all the sound devices. For example, alliteration. And when you are talking about alliteration, ensure that you underline the sound. Avoid writing it in strokes or writing it in bracket, but underline. If it is what a bond to break, write the line and then underline the b in bond and the b in break. Again, if there is rhyme, ensure that there is the use of rhyme, but as you explain or illustrate the element of rhyme, you don't use the conjunction and, but you rather use comma. For example, in that poem I've just sang, there is the use of make and take. So I'll write there is use of rhyme and not rhyming words. I'll say there is the use of rhyme, illustration, or I put a dash, then say make, comma, take are rhyming words. If you use and, not, if you use conjunction and between, you are not going to score. So a comma will give you a mark. Those are basic techniques that may make you lose marks even if we have the content. Of course, we still have consonants, and go look at the meaning of consonants. The repetition of vowel sounds. Assonance might also be examined when you are being asked about the sound devices. Please note or remember that repetition is not a sound device. But other than rhyme, other than alliteration, other than consonants, you can still think about idiophone or onomatopoeia. So question 1, even if it is on a speech writing, even if it is a song, even if it is a narrative, you are likely to be asked the techniques. But if this time it happens to be a poem, then be prepared for the sound devices. And remember that repetition is not example. And always ensure that answers in literature must be illustrated. So the question 1 is likely to be on sound devices. If they don't ask you to explain how rhythm has been achieved, maybe they might ask you to explain the importance, the significance of a given sound device. Could be the significance of alliteration. Please note, as a smart learner, before you give the effectiveness, you must accept or confirm that it is true there is use of assonance before you give its effectiveness. And please note that all the sound devices, the effectiveness is to enhance the musicality and memorability of the poem. So ensure that. Again, if they ask you about the narrative, still think about the features of narratives. If it will be oral song, then think about the features of oral songs. For example, conversational tone, direct address, maybe for authenticity, the usage of local language, and any other thing. If apostrophe is there, well and good. But you are free to focus on all the elements that calls for performance. Then, of course, if you've been given something like that, they might also ask you questions on performance. Like right now, I'm making a presentation. Then somebody will ask you, what is it that made the audience listen to my presentation up to the end? In simple terms, what the examiner is asking you about is the verbal and the non-verbal cues. At times, they'll be very specific. They might ask you the oral techniques or verbal cues. And if it is verbal cues, you must ensure that you talk about verbal. And be reminded that they include the likes of tonal variation. Could be like right now, I'm using more of emphatic tone. If I was talking about the poem Every Step I talked about, could be I'm talking about excited tone. If I'm talking about my lover, Yolanda, in the poem, and I'm pleased about Yolanda, I'll be talking about a love tone or excited tone or happy tone. So when we are talking about tonal variation as a verbal cue, then it means you have to illustrate which type of tone will you be using. Again, there is also intonation, which is verbal. You can also think about voice projection. For you to get me clearly, I have to project my voice. Of course, element of audibility is verbal as well as mimicry. But note, if you are given a poem, if you are given a narrative, then you must always specify where is it in the poem. Do you have the verbal cue or the non-verbal cue? Without that, you will not score. Please note again that we've gone away from writing appropriate or meaningful. You can only use meaningful when you are talking about eye contact, meaningful eye contact. And now Now that we've talked about verbal cues, at times the examiner might also ask you, what non-verbal cues will you employ? Think about the facial expression, and still you must specify the particular type of facial expression you're talking about. Is it smile? Is it frowning? Is it pressed lips? Is it raised eyebrows? Etc. etc. If you're talking about the usage of gestures, you can't talk of appropriate gestures, but you have to tell the examiner that I'll be nodding my head, I'll be pointing at myself, or I'll place my hand on my chest to show that it is my lover, Yolanda, and no one else. That is specifically on verbal and non-verbal. Please allow me, before I finalize on that particular question, that you can also be asked specifically on how would you deliver. And remember, I'm very specific or particular with words. How would you deliver? When you are asked how would you deliver, your answer must have at least a verbal cue and a non-verbal cue. For example, how would I deliver the line, my lover, Yolanda? If you're very keen, I'll use facial expression, specifically smile in the word my lover, to show that I'm happy. Again, that is non-verbal. Then I go ahead and bring the element of the intonation. I'll use a falling intonation to show with the finality that she is my lover, Yolanda, and not any other person's love. If I don't want to use intonation, but I've already picked that element of smile, I'll go with an excited tone that I am excited about Yolanda. Always note that you must always give the reason for every verbal or non-verbal cue you've picked to use. If I've decided not to use I will smile, I can still use as a non-verbal cue the element of pointing at myself that she is my lover. But of course, still I'll use the intonation or voice projection for me to be heard. Again, the examiner might still ask you, how would you say or how would you perform? Please don't forget that how would you perform and how would you say still revolves around the same. My dear listeners, I don't want to go beyond this, but in our next episode, before you sit for your exam, we will still talk about other elements of oral skills, so that by the time you'll be going to the paper, you'll be psychologically prepared for the exams. But this moment, allow me wish you good revision time until you're done. Be blessed, and I wish you the very best in your paper 1 and other papers in English and K.C.S.E at large. Believe in yourself and give your best. Hoping to see you soonest before you go for the paper for the other parts that are left. Be blessed.